How are you doing, sir? It's good to see you in person properly for the first time in 2020. It's been an interesting year, but we're not going to go all COVID depressed. We're looking forward to the future in this bit. So, but how's your year been? Well. How's your year been?
Very interesting, like everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Personally, it's been challenging. I think same as everyone else. You know, you're kind of locked into a small room for a long period of time. Either too much time with your family or not enough. Business-wise, we've done really well.
Yeah, I can imagine it's been quite high demand for solving some of the off-site. I mean, most funds are prepped a little bit to work off-site, but not 24/7, right? So.
No, it's interesting because I think one of the great things about RFA and any firm that specialises in a sector that's very niche is that you have to understand your client's business model well. And that whole startup hedge fund or PE world where, you know, the first couple of years you're just going after the money, right, as much as possible. And so I've always tried to build solutions with the marketing and the IR teams in mind because they're always on the road. You can't be in a situation where you're sat in a hotel room with awful internet, not being able to connect to your files. So all of our solution designs for the last 2 or 3 years have always been based around people moving around all the time, right? Or having the need to synchronize files because they're going to be sat on a plane for 10 hours before they meet an investor. So actually we were well prepared for this without actually preparing for it. You know.
But that's for the front office, right?
Yeah.
You've had to do front office, middle, back, the whole lot. I mean, most people were, again, prep for that, you know, the doomsday situation anyway, but actually preparing and executing can be two different things sometimes.
Yeah.
I guess this year's been a lot of executing what you already planned as well as getting new clients into.
Definitely executing. I think there's a lot of challenges around things like, so there's two things to say from a technology side. A lot of firms that we've started working with where there was like a last minute rush to help them because they weren't prepared were firms where they were using traditional technology that required resource allocation. So things like CPU, RAM, all the basic technology needs from a server. And they might have been using like a private cloud or they had a server in the office where if you think about it historically, if someone's using a product like Citrix or remote desktop services, you never really planned historically to have every single person using that product. So if you had a 20-man firm, for example, so like a mid-size hedge fund, you would never buy 20 licenses for Citrix because the likelihood is 15 of them are just paying for something you never use. Yep. So as soon as it went into this process and people had to use it, people were scrabbling around for licensing, but also hardware on the back end that they couldn't buy because there was no distribution. So we had a lot of firms that were working in a very traditional way for the last 8 or 9 years who were calling us up going, we need your help. Like we need to move to you and to public cloud like Azure or AWS because we can't get hold of resources. You know, we're calling up our IT company, no one's answering because people had made the wrong decision to furlough staff. And I just took a gamble and went the opposite route and recruited more.
Really? All guns blazing for what, from March onwards when it came
We've recruited 14 more staff this year.
Really?
So it's been, and that's just London.
Just London.
So in an average of one a month.
Global, right?
9 offices globally now.
Yeah.
That kind of helped as well. And again, it wasn't necessarily planning, I probably shouldn't say that, but you know, the fact that we've got offices in Asia, they were hit first. So we were already planning that before it happened here, so that kind of helped.
Yeah.
And then we have, the way that we work with our clients is that we assign the client, rather than traditionally where firms like us assign an account manager to kind of manage the relationship, we actually assign IT managers. So like ex-IT managers who have become bored with the fact that they just get one system to look after. Right, it's a recurring theme with IT people. If you look after internal IT, after a couple of years you fix everything. There's nothing else to do if you do it right. So we bring them in and we give them 2 or 3 small clients where they do a couple of days a week on each and then they get to manage it. So in doing that, we had some where they can't go to the client site and do any work because we're not allowed, or they're shut down because they're all at home. Or so we moved roles around as well.
Yeah.
We've got 300 staff globally now. You know, when I joined, we had about 180 or something, so we've almost doubled. So being able to shift roles around was good. But, you know, that's the business between us and our clients, and that's been great. And the growth we've had has kind of helped us help the clients that haven't been able to succeed in this environment. If you imagine you've got a fund that focuses on commercial real estate, we actually have a client who's so niche, they focus on commercial real estate, which is shopping centres. So within months, they've gone from 17 billion to 4. But we can't stop their IT. You know, we can't save them money by just going, okay, we'll have a break for 3 months and pause the contract. So we've had to go to some of our clients, and to support them as a partner we've said, we're going to do a 50% revenue between us and you to help you drop your budget. We help them renegotiate contracts with all their telephones, internet, Bloomberg in some instances.
Really?
Who have been helping some of their clients. But on agreed short-term basis that when things pick up, they then repay it. We were doing the same thing. And some of them unfortunately just couldn't cope and they've gone. 2 out of 900, so it's not that bad.
It's a pretty good ratio. Survival ratio, that one.
Exactly. But then we've had 4 where we've kept them on this 50% cost base just to help them get through this period, which has been a cost to us. But then we've brought on other new clients that
You're
have
still
actually
alive,
succeeded.
they're still alive.
Exactly.
Coming into next year, we've just had a vaccine come in this week. See what happens there. But, you know, coming out of the virus, it looks like lots of people, there was a kind of the oh shit moment to start with, and then there was a, okay, well, this is how we're going to adapt to it, and then there was a, oh wow, this is actually forcing us into a situation where we're having to develop our business a bit better. And I think lots of people are coming out fitter than when they went in, actually, because it's really forced that discipline.
They will. And I think, you know, the relationship side between all of these funds and the people they work with, whether it's IR, marketing, membership bodies like you guys, where, you know, on AYU we can share thoughts and ideas, and whether it's from office spaces to like
I think cybersecurity is one of the ones that's popped up a lot this week. Is I think Tom Ponton, who's just launching Shakuma, was asking both about what you guys had heard on the ground about how investors were feeling about the remote office, and also how he should be preparing, and funds in general should be preparing for cybersecurity at home, because, you know, it's your home office. You know, at best it's a nice shed in the garden. At worst, it's, you know, it's an extra table in the spare room. You know, how are people dealing with that? How are you guys dealing with that?
So from a technology perspective, it's quite easy to fix that, right? And all you have to make a shift between having centralised cybersecurity controls, so everything from the business side, policies and procedures and things, but also what is securing the user and the machine, right? If you think historically, everyone had a firewall in an office, and the premise was whatever device you bring in, as long as it's inside the firewall, it's safe. You know, the user and the device is safe. Obviously now everyone's sitting outside the firewall. So what's the point in the firewall unless you've still got traditional servers that are sat inside, right? Same premise with cloud. What we've done is we've taken a view of technology component, but also operational focus around people. So one of the challenges that we've had with our clients is about bad levers. You know, you've got someone coming to the office every day, if they're not happy with their role, you can see that quite quickly, right? We've all got enough experience to notice when someone's not happy. You can't do that if they're at home. So we've been using behavioural analysis tools, not to deep dive into what they're doing like Big Brother, but to look at how they're using the data and also how they're using the machine. Right, so it looks at the way that software is running on the machine, which replaces the antivirus component, because it's doing all of that for us. But then there's an element which is looking at how they're using the internet, what their behavioural patterns are with email, because believe it or not, clients are asking us, how long has this member of staff spent online today? How much time have they spent on the internet? How much time did they spend on their email? How much time did they spend on their execution management platform? We're getting all of that at the beginning. So by using this behavioural analysis, we're able to go to them now and say, just to let you know, this guy spent 3 hours today doing nothing but downloading files from your core shared area. So we think you need to monitor him because it might be that he's looking to leave. Mm-hmm. So we've been trying to think holistically about all of that.
Has that skill set come from prepping for external cyber attack stuff that you've started to, what you know from the external stuff, you started to apply that to the internal thing? Is that where it's come from?
It's come from my focus always of looking at core roles within a fund, right? And always focusing on, it's that age-old thing of, plan for the worst but hope for the best. And all I've done is I've converted that and focused on the most high-risk people in the roles within the fund. And for me, that's always been people who have spent 90% of their time outside of the office, which is the people in marketing or fundraising, IR, that kind of thing. And because they're always outside of the office, we've always had to have these security controls on their machines, because they're the people with the clients list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the list we're trying to protect. And they're the ones that have it. So it's just been a continuation of that. The only other thing I would say is that when you kind of decentralise cybersecurity, the other thing that we've always had to think about is what happens if the FCA come and do an information request, because it's literally they want 6 months of activity of that individual, and the behavioural analysis tool allows us to really hone in on what they've been doing, but specifically the timeline that the FCA have asked for, not just like here's all the logs from his laptop for the last 3 years from when he bought it.
Yeah.
The same with web filtering. We never really block any sites other than porn and things like that, the obvious ones, but we use it in case there's an information request. And if someone ever gets an email that's got a rogue link, if they click on that link, it blocks the site because it's rogue. So we don't hinder the work anyone's doing, because we want them to be really efficient and actually perform, but we've got the ability to govern it in the background.
Absolutely.
And that's
there must be
key.
a certain amount of education of the teams in general about how to, as you said earlier, when you're in the office, the firewall was there and the procedures are there, and it's kind of that protection is almost a given. And I think most non-tech people would just be like, yeah, well, they've sorted it out. But actually, when everyone's spread out, those people need prepping, educating a bit more as well. So surely you've been actually talking to the people you wouldn't normally talk to.
Although I only look 21, I've actually been in this industry for 24 years. Right.
It's the pickling that does it.
Exactly. But one of my first roles was teaching people how to use Netscape Navigator, if you remember that.
I can just about remember that.
And I want to talk about a cassette now and a pencil and how the two of them work together, but I won't go down that route. But then for me, my first job really, although it's teaching people technology, was actually teaching them about the risks, because you're connecting online and there's data on there and people connect your machine and all of that kind of stuff. So I've actually personally been training a lot of our clients through Zoom and answering Q&As and doing sessions about it, because there's two sides to this. One is making sure people are aware and vigilant. Google reported I think it was a 350% increase in new websites that were malicious. Right, that was in April. So by now, it's got to be double that.
Yeah.
So it's teaching people to be vigilant, right, to make sure they notify the right people if they think they've got a phishing email that others might have. It's about making sure the team talk to each other and actually protect each other as a team. But then there's the flip side of actually teaching people about the harm of what we call shadow IT. So if you don't give them facilities to do something, so let's just say if people didn't have the facility to access shared business documents at home, what are they going to do? One, they're going to call their PA and say, can you email me all the files that I need to work with this week, please? Immediately you've got these files roaming all over the place with no versions, right? Two, if they've got some now, so they might just download Dropbox and start using that to share corporate files. So it's about educating people about the risks of trying to work out shortcuts. And then when you do give them the tools to not have to do that, So we've done a lot of work with SharePoint this year and using containerization. And actually it's what we're doing with Tom and Shakuma, and I mean, they're going to use some of our office locations and things because they don't need an office right now. It's a perfect example. But teaching people how to use SharePoint safely, you know, you can synchronize files, but you should set expiry dates on files so that even if you do email that file to someone and you want them to read it once, after 3 days they can't access it again. You know, if you don't have a corporate laptop, you can log on to SharePoint online, but you can't print, you can't download, you know, you can work on Excel within the browser, which you're not going to want to do full time, but it gives you the ability to work on stuff if you're in an internet cafe or something. So it's about educating them to the risks of a breach, how to control it, the right communication channels, but then also how to use the new tools in the new collaborative world that we're in now. You know, a lot of what we've done to people actually is we're using SharePoint as the back end for all of the security controls, version control, you know, policies around not being able to print, send, download, Gmail, all of that kind of good stuff. But then actually, rather than using that as the interface, because no one really likes the interface of SharePoint still, has lots of bad comment, you know, we're actually using Teams as the interface. So when you've got your Teams channel, we've got, you know, HR, marketing, portfolios, new deals, you know, all of those kind of core components, clients, whatever. But then when you go into the Teams channel, you've got a whole Microsoft Planner section for project management as a team. You've got the whole file system within there. So using that as the interface.
So can people buy that off the shelf from you guys as a package, and then you just tailor it to however they're structured, basically?
Yeah, and we've extended it now. So similar to what you were talking about with Amir earlier, we've taken what we call Hedge 365. Very original, but we are an IT company, not a marketing firm. They've actually just given us a load of money to market it as a product. So we're helping them go into the finance sector by developing these products specifically for funds.
Okay.
So what we've done is we've thought, right, we need something that's completely officeless and completely serverless. We just want software as a service. You can access it from anywhere, but depending on the device they're on, has varying security controls. And this Hedge 365 or HF 365, it obviously uses that for email. Teams is the collaboration tool for files. So you can actually work within a Teams channel live. You don't have to have Word, Excel or anything within the Teams browser itself. But then what we've done is we've integrated Snowflake, which was a data warehouse tool. I think it IPO'd for 70 billion this year. So we were their first IT partner 2.5 years ago.
Really?
One of our biggest PE firms invested in them and asked us to work with them, and we did some due diligence. It was great. So we kind of stopped using SQL servers about 2.5 years ago. So we've integrated that as the back end, and then we're integrating Power BI into the Teams channels. So you've got your chat, you've got your planning, all per team. You've got your file systems, and then you've got a Power BI one, which is part of the Power App suite, it's called, where they can actually look at the performance of their teams. So if you've got a research analyst, you can see how his fund performed based on his decisions for the last 3 months. So we're starting to aggregate all the data as well, like as a dashboard tool.
Interesting. So you've got the actual team behaviour matched with the business behaviour, which is not been done much in this space. Normally it's the performance at the front end rather than the HR alpha at the back end, should we say. How much of this is, or how much this year has it been investor driven? You know, what have the investors been asking of the funds when it comes to the tech? Because surely when you can't go to the office for DD, you can't go to everyone's house for DD. Are they relying on you for some DD? What are they driving?
It's interesting one. We're quite fortunate because, you know, my background and also our CIO, we've come from an environment where we were there as advisors to investors. You know, before I joined as a partner of RFA 6 years ago now, I did due diligence for investors. I got involved in JVs, M&A deals, that kind of thing. So I've got a pool of investors, 22 at the moment, that I do due diligence for. So I'm educating the investors in what questions to ask, like weekly, right? Up until March, it was monthly. And it's because they're going in to look at things they want to invest in, whether it's funds or businesses or, kind of like VC in some cases.
Yeah.
And people are coming up with these weird and wonderful systems they've tried to design themselves. They don't know how to ask the questions. So on a lot of occasions, I'm sat on the hedge fund side as their CTO answering the questions to another client of mine who I've just given the question set to, which is great because it both makes them feel comfortable. And normally that's a successful output. But there's a lot of firms who either try and do it themselves still, and they've been around this industry for 20 years and they've got a very old question set, or they're paid as consultants to do the questions, where they're still asking things like, what do you do when your office is not accessible after a week versus a month versus 3 months? Where's your DR site with a desk with a spare computer on it? But the challenge now is the question around, how do you configure your firewall, and what type of firewall do you have to protect the network, and how do you segregate your network from other firms if you're in a shared building? Because the answer right now is we don't have a firewall, but you just have to justify to them why you don't need a firewall. It's because you don't have an office. But that extends to the due diligence even of some of the big prime brokers. They've still got the traditional. I was filling one out with a client this morning, and one of the questions was, how do you segregate your office network from other tenants in the building? You can't put NA, or we don't have a firewall. You need a justification. So there's a couple of things we've done. One is with launches this year, because we've got 2 offices right now. We've just taken on a new office in Lansdowne House, which is twice the size, because we're trying to give our staff more space. But the other side of it, we segregated half of the office for startups. So Tom's firm, for example, and 2 others, we've designated their own firewall and their own network completely separate from ours.
We're moving to a new way of working next year. We've all, to an extent, enjoyed the working from home, but want to get back to the office. But I don't think we fully want to get back to the office. There's going to be a hybrid there somewhere, whether it's an office a couple of days a week, working from home, members club, having a pop-up office or a special space that you can rent once a week for bring your team together.
Yeah.
From a tech perspective, what do you think the office of 21, 22, 23 looks like?
Well, I can give you a selfish answer or the actual answer, I suppose.
But give me both, and then that's nicely balanced.
My personal view is we've been at home now for so long, there's a lot of people who are not going to want to come back to the office ever again. So there's going to be a natural push to try and get people back in, right? And part of the reason I say that is it's kind of vital to people's well-being, right? If you imagine, a lot of my clients in the UK are, anything from 2 users up to, a big PE firm with 2,500 users. It varies, right? But one of the things that we all talk about as peers who are leading companies is mental health, right? And I'm not going to get into that, but you've got an individual who's in a studio flat since March. They're not really in a good way right now. So we have to have some form of coming back to the office, exactly as you said, right? And I think it's up to people who have the ability to, and who are leaders in our space, to help smaller firms who necessarily can't afford that, or they don't have the means or the tools or whatever. So this is partly why I've done this with our new office, to say to funds that are launching, it is going to take you a little bit more time to raise money right now. Doing virtual due diligence is tough. And we've seen that with a lot of our startups. So all I've done is I've said, look, I've got a big office in Berkeley Square, I've got 300 staff. I can't have them all back in the office right now anyway, because I need to do social distancing. I've reserved an area for hot desking for up to 20 people. So you don't have to pay for desk space or anything. You can just come and use it when you need to, if you need to be in town. We've got 4 big meeting rooms. So if you need to do DDQ and you've managed to get them in, book the meeting room out. It's all online on an app. We've got these cool little iPads on the doors where people can see who's in there and things. Happy for you to use those meeting rooms, because we're IT people, we just use it with clients anyway. And then if you don't have an office but you need to have an abode, what I've said to them is I've got a load of offices down one side, segregated, locks on the door, fully ready for compliance testing. We'll run all of your connectivity, and we can put up to 4 desks in each room, which if you're a startup, you're only going to have 1 or 2 people in every day anyway. And that's me then helping my clients. They don't have to try and find a lease, which could be a risk if they're not around.
And the knock-on effect of that is their bottom line number, which is basically going to affect the management fees that they're charging to the investor who's investing in a seeded fund. Management fees are effectively now, not across the board, but they are your base costs. Yeah. That's kind of where we're going. We might not be exactly there yet, but they're your base costs. If you can bring those base costs down, it means you can get from 0 to 60 a lot quicker, and 60 to 150 a lot quicker. So, all in all, helping. I think what we're planning to do, at least with our own team, and I really hope with AU members, is yes, we want to keep doing the traditional stuff of traditional events of getting people together on a educational, informational, networking basis. But we're also adding some of the slightly more social, fun, experiential things, which are, mental health is a pretty big deal. And if you can mix in some outward bound type stuff. We go on an adventure trip. We're going skiing in March. If you can get that stuff involved with getting a team together, meeting investors, getting to know people on a personal basis, then you're that step, one step closer to a business relationship, as well as enjoying your life at the same time, which is pretty crucial now, especially since we've been locked up for so long.
And helping each other.
Yeah. That's basically the foundation. Is, I think, the effort to help each other wherever possible is a win for everyone. And we've ignored that for a bit too long in space. It doesn't have to be zero sum at all. We can do a lot more than that.
And the longer term effect, I think, is there's obviously a relationship element to that, because it creates trust, because you're openly and transparently helping each other. But actually, if you can see the reward of that by the smaller people that you're helping out actually coming out really outperforming their peers and succeeding, it kind of makes everything a bit more worthwhile.
I think you'd like to be doing it probably around Goodwood, and we're in the pits with the client. You're a gentleman racer.
Yes.
It's catering,
and I've had a few. Yeah. So I was in something called the Magnificent Sevens this year, which obviously went from 12 races to 6. And the one big race a year that we do in Europe was Le Mans this year, the first year they've ever done it, and that was cancelled. So everyone was a bit gutted. But I try and involve clients in that. I do like passenger rides around local London circuits and stuff before the races when we're doing testing and things like that. But you need hobbies like that.
You do. You do. So you can come and work in an office, but you can also get taken around the track by the boss as well.
Maybe I should bring the caterer to Berkeley Square and I could do timed laps.
Well, actually,
I'm sure
we could do
hot
laps around Berkeley Square.
That wouldn't cause offence to any police officer, I'm sure.
Okay. Before we get in any further trouble, thank you very much for coming in today. It's good to see you in person. It's good to see the RFA team in person, because we've all been locked up for far too long. So here's to 21, and here's to hopefully a brave new world of tech in the future.
Yeah, thank you, mate.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
Can't shake hands.